Hello there, my very good friends. Andy here for What Culture, and for me, considering the Wrestler of the Year is a lot more than just listing down the 10 names that I think have had the most 4 or 5 star matches or whatever. To me, I think you've really got to consider every single aspect of pro wrestling performance. I'm talking promos, I am talking matches of course, because that is important, but I'm also talking about things like presence and aura and how the wrestler carries themselves. I'm also talking about things like consistency, week to week excellence, but also highs and indeed lows, because those have to be taken into account as well when you're separating the very best. On top of that, when putting this list together, I've also considered the importance of that wrestler to their company and indeed the business as a whole. Now, a key point of this is, for me, on a Wrestler of the Year list, you have to have been doing this all damn year. If you've had, I don't know, 2 or 3 really great moments, but there's a whole lot of nothing in between them, you're not making the cut, no matter how good you are. So I must apologize to the likes of Kazuchika Okada, Tomohiro Ishii, that one pained me in particular, Sasha Banks, whoever the heck else you want to name. Not quite there. The highs certainly were, there just weren't enough of them. And if you get to the end of this list and I haven't mentioned your fave, check out the article version of this video. It's on our website now. You can catch the link in the description below. I've got a lengthy list of honorable mentions, and chances are, if somebody has a fair case to enter the Wrestler of the Year conversation, you're gonna find them right there. But let's get on with this damn thing. I'm Andy for What Culture, and here are the 10 best wrestlers of 2021. At number 10, Nick Jackson. For me, the most impressive title reign in America in 2021 wrestling, it didn't belong to a singles wrestler, it belonged to a tag team. For me, the best year of the Young Bucks' career. They have really excelled in the ring, and in terms of characters as well. They've come into their own as the worst guys you've ever met in your entire life. But more important than that, when they were tag team champions, they made those belts feel big, important, prestigious. They elevated the AEW tag team titles to a new level, and for that, they deserve immense credit. And Nick, as always, remains the most impressive of the two, the most eye-catching and the most dazzling. That's partly by design, because Matt Jackson, of course, wrestles a more grounded style. He's kind of the Rock of the group, while Nick is primarily the flashy guy. But I'll tell you what, he's one of the absolute best flashy guys in the entire business. He also has the wonderful Bryan Danielson singles match to separate him a little bit more from his brother, but across the board, both of them really have been excellent. And yeah, I'm putting a tag guy in at number 10, but are you gonna argue with me that Nick Jackson doesn't deserve it? The guy's a prick character-wise, the matches are excellent, he's been doing it all year, the titles felt important. Very good. At number 9, Hangman Adam Page. The thing about Adam Page is, compared to most of the people on this list, well, actually all of them, really, he doesn't have a particularly long list of obvious match of the year contenders. I mean, obviously the Kenny match was tremendous. He had a great match against Brian Cage at Double or Nothing. There's a bunch of multi-man matches, bunch of tag team matches here and there, some neat and tidy television bouts, but certainly once you get to the upper end of this list, the people there have a more impressive body of work between the ropes than Page. So why is he on the list, you ask? Well, it's character work, baby. The anxious millennial cowboy shtick has connected to a ridiculous degree in AEW, and it's as much down to the plotting and presentation of this 2-year character arc as it is Page's week-to-week performances. This guy is a phenomenal, believable babyface. He's had one of the best 2-year runs that American wrestling has seen in a long time, and he's just become the kind of guy you really want to root for. His portrayal of things like anxiety has been really nuanced and really subtle, and when he's been knocked down, you've been willing him to get back up again. Of course, the title win over Kenny Omega at Full Gear resonated exactly the way it should have. It was the biggest organic moment, taking things like debuts away from all of this, but in terms of the storytelling process, the biggest moment in AEW history. It was a great chase, he's a great character, and he's had a great year. Now, we're going to find out if he's going to be a great champion. Number 8. Tam Nakano. When it comes to match quality in 2021 and dividing up by promotion, you're hard pressed to find a company that's been more consistent than Stardom. The company has excelled from start to finish, and when it comes to that company, I think a lot of people are going to look at names like Utami Hayashishita and Shuri and Mayu Iwatani as the most obvious standout performers because they're the people that have garnered the most praise. But for me, Tam Nakano is the most complete wrestler in that ridiculously talented group. What separates Tam from some of the other people on the roster, and I think it's a great roster, let me just reiterate that for a second. What separates her is her adaptability. She is incredibly diverse in what she's able to deliver between the ropes. If you watch all of her biggest matches, my particular favorite is the hair versus hair match with Julia, but the Mayu Iwatani series as well, there's structure always going to be kind of similar, but there are clear differences between these things. Some are pissy and really disrespectful, while others are heated and working from beneath, an underdog spirit and all that other good stuff. Tam has had a ridiculously diverse year. I think she's kind of unheralded in that regard as well, because I can't think of a single match, a big match that she's had that has let me down. Really looking forward to seeing what she does in 2022. But for those consistent, varied performances, and as someone who really makes you will for her in these fights, I think she's been excellent and she deserves her place. At number 7, oh boy, it's Roman Reigns. The good things about Roman Reigns and his performances in 2021 are pretty easy to list, right? I mean, he's had the best year of his career. I don't think anyone's really going to argue, especially as a singles wrestler. He feels big, he feels important, he has cultivated an aura. When he comes down that ramp, you've got to pay full attention to this guy because he's a commanding presence. In fact, he's become the kind of attention-grabbing star, at least within WWE, that the company has been trying to build for ages, really, for the best part of a decade, if not longer. I have nothing but respect for the work that this guy has put in to establish himself as this top guy, as the tribal chief, as the head of the table. He's confident, he's assured, and at his best, he's absolutely captivating. Being the top guy in the biggest promotion in the world as a villain feels like the most natural thing in the world to him, and when you consider how unnatural some of Roman's other roles in this company have felt, that's no mean feat. And yeah, I mean, look at his best matches. I'm talking Bryan Danielson and Edge, of course, including the triple threat. I'm talking Cesaro. Excellent work. Certainly some of the best matches in WWE all year. So why only number 7 for Roman Reigns, you ask? And I'm willing to bet that a good portion of you watching this video are indeed asking that question. Well, for me, the week-to-week overacted, repetitive backstage segments where every word is over-delivered and every facial expression is overemphasized, getting a little bit repetitive, I'm not gonna lie. We've reached the point where it's a very similar thing every single week, and that's got to factor in to something like this. It can't just be the highs. You've got to consider the week to week as well. And also, look, match quality is subjective. Everyone has their different preferences, and that's fine. We can all like different things, but for me, a few of these bigger matches just didn't quite hit the heights I would have liked to have put them higher. I'm talking the Kevin Owens match in particular. The Edge singles match didn't do a lot for me, and especially the Big E match at Survivor Series, which is good when it should have been absolutely fantastic for me. Few too many big level disappointments there to put Roman higher, but make no mistake, full of admiration for the work he's done. I think he's brilliant. He's one of my absolute favorite people to watch in all of wrestling. Good for him. Looking forward to seeing what he does next year because I think he can push even higher. Number 6, Will Ospreay. Character is largely what keeps Will Ospreay from finishing higher here. I think the Conor McGregor-esque shtick, and he's literally quoted him in promos and stuff, it feels forced. It doesn't feel natural. It feels more like a performance than something that just comes to him. And he's playing a heel, he's the leader of the United Empire, and I think he plays that role relatively well. But even Becky Lynch on Raw, who is, playing a villainous persona now, she's not been able to make a similar shtick work either. I just don't think that this is a character that's well suited, and I think modern wrestlers would do well to take less influence, maybe, from Conor McGregor. But look, Will Ospreay's had a tremendous year. That's why he's on the list here. I think if you're into his style, and I am, it's very easy to make a case for him. Just look at the highest level of matches he's had against guys like Kazuchika Okada, Shingo Takagi, 2 career rivalries for him there, and the matches installed even in this clap crowd era in New Japan have been amongst the best he's ever had. He's also had a great match with Zack Sabre Jr. He's gone back to the UK and really elevated people like Ricky Knight Jr. and Michael Oku, which is to his credit as well. And what's also to his credit is that Will Ospreay was out for like 3-4 months of this year, and he's still on the list. The guy wrestles a style that is custom calibrated to generate lavish praise from all corners of the wrestling sphere. And I think the guy's still only 28 years old. I think that within the next few years, when that character work catches up to the in-ring work, the guy's gonna be a monster, if he isn't already. Number 5, Eddie Kingston. It brings me such joy to be able to put Eddie Kingston on this list, because after 19 years in the business, after having to sell his ring gear to try and make his mortgage payments, the guy in 2021 is a legitimate TV star, and it's just fantastic to watch. It's one of the great stories in wrestling, and it's not even fiction. He started the year pretty strongly, coming together with Jon Moxley, working the tag team stuff, and having that great match at Double or Nothing, but that alone wouldn't be enough for a Wrestler of the Year case. You have to really look to Eddie's last 3 or 4 months to strengthen his position here, because my goodness, those high-level matches with Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, people like Daniel Garcia, just some of the absolute most believable, rugged, hard-hitting stuff you're gonna see anywhere in pro wrestling at the moment. And you know, Eddie was always the most believable guy in the sport and one of, if not the best talkers. But I think this year, for people who maybe weren't as familiar with his big in-ring game, has been kind of eye-opening, because he's just as good at that stuff as well. Eddie Kingston makes you want to live and die for him. He's that kind of guy. He inspires a level of devotion in the audience that most wrestlers would kill for. And in 2022, if he doesn't win the big one, I'll probably just post quite a mild tweet about it, but it won't be good. He should win the big one. That'd be nice. Number 4, Syuri. Another one from Stardom here, and Syuri's had a tremendous year. She has, of course, starred in one of the most acclaimed matches of the entire year opposite Itami. Their rivalry will be concluded a couple of weeks after I'm recording this, and hey, maybe they'll hit the same heights again. That match drew such widespread acclaim from wrestling's most influential tastemakers, really, that it's one we're going to be talking about forever. But Syuri's year goes beyond just one single match. She's been tremendous. With the SWA World Championship, she has taken what used to be considered the black sheep belt of Stardom, one that didn't really fit in or have much of an identity, and made it a real prize worth fighting for. I think when you take a title and when you elevate it to such a degree, how can you not belong on a list like this? Her matches are really interesting in Stardom as well. She works a hybrid style. It's a little bit of MMA, it's a little bit of pro wrestling, and she's not the first wrestler to ever do that by a long shot. But with the ongoing kind of Bushiroadification of the Stardom house style, she offers something a little bit different, something a bit unique, without feeling like she doesn't fit in. And if you want to talk consistency, Shuri is right up there. She has had a ridiculous year, one of my favorite discoveries of 2021, and looking forward to following the rest of her career. Number 3, Shingo Takagi. Probably a number 1 contender for a lot of people, Shingo, and I understand why. New Japan's had a difficult time through the coronavirus pandemic. Clap crowds, look, safety measures. They are trying to control the virus in Japan. Measure they have taken there. You're not allowed to shout, you're not allowed to scream, you wear a mask and you clap. I understand, I'm in favor of these measures. If it keeps people safe, you gotta do that above all else. But the shows aren't a lot of fun to watch. A lot of wrestlers in that company have suffered as a result. Shingo might be the one guy who's immune to it all, and he's had a run with the IWGP World Heavyweight Championship that for me has defied all odds. In fact, no wrestler for me in a clap crowd environment should have any business putting together the body of work that Shingo has. Bruising, hard-hitting encounters with Jeff Cobb, more careful, methodical, and considered matches with Hiroshi Tanahashi. He had an absolute meat slapper with my boy Big Tom Ish. as well. Shingo is just great to watch even in this setting. He's dynamic, he's hard hitting, he's got a presence, he fills the screen, he makes noise with his just slamming beef into people. He's a joy to watch. He has, for me personally, been something of a savior for this New Japan product. What a year. Number 1 was not far off at all for this guy, believe me. And at number 2, Kenny Omega. Again, he's going to be a lot of people's number 1 choice. And look, it's easy to feel even more admiration for the year Kenny Omega has had now that we know the extent of his injury problems. This guy has put himself through hell just to entertain us, to ensure that the payoff to the Hangman Page storyline was as satisfying and as big as it could be. I have the utmost respect for that, undying admiration for Kenny continuing to work through all this stuff, and hey, I hope he takes the right amount of time off now. I hope he recovers and come back stronger, because he has certainly earned a nice long break. And look, he's had an excellent year. His work still has pop and snap to it. He's still dynamic and explosive, and he's still got a second to none eye for detail in pro wrestling. Even though he's barely held together by duct tape, and even though he has struggled physically for a lot of this year, what he's been able to achieve against people like Ray Phoenix in the triple threat at Double or Nothing, in the Hangman Page match, of course, the Jungle Boy match was tremendous as well. It's a great year for Kenny, great stuff, and I've really enjoyed the double act with him and Don Callis as well. But what prevents Kenny Omega from finishing at number 1, and this is going to be contentious, but it's how I feel about the guy. And when you come to this level of the list and everyone is so great, you kind of have to nitpick a little bit to separate people. So, Kenny Omega does like dressing up with his mates and doing matches as Ghostbusters. He does like the odd hammy, over-the-top facial expression or vocal inflection. He does like doing segments where him and Don Callis have a silly portrait on the wall, and hey, look, they're at a kid's nursery and Michael Nakazawa's getting beaten up by children. I'm sure these were a lot of fun to perform in, and you know, they were funny. I laughed at them at the time. But is that really what you're looking for somebody who's meant to be preserving aura as the absolute top guy in the company? Look, Kenny Omega's number 2 on my list. I think he's done a tremendous job, and this is a minor complaint. It's really not that big a deal. But the problem is that the person at number 1 doesn't have any minor complaints. So Kenny Omega is absolutely one of the best wrestlers in the world, but he's not the best. Number 1, Bryan Danielson. Well, call me Christopher Nolan, because to make my point about Bryan Danielson being the wrestler of the year, I have created a list within a list. Listception, 10 points, 10 reasons why the American Dragon is the wrestler of the year. Let's go. Number 10, he started the year as the most consistent TV performer in all of WWE, having bangers with Cesaro, Jey Uso, and everyone else he came across. Number 9, he saved a dry WrestleMania main event program, breathing new life into it, saving something that was really struggling in terms of quarter-hour ratings and general interest levels, and made it a better match and story across the board. Number 8, he somehow made us believe in a stipulation that's been impossible to believe in for years, when he put his career on the line against Roman Reigns and actually ended up living up to it. Number 7, he remained relevant, important, and really vital to all pro wrestling discussion in the United States and beyond, even though he was off camera for 4 months. The saga of where he was going to go dominated headlines, even when the CM Punk news was on the go. It was huge. And that's the power of the American Dragon. Number 6, the promise, the potential of his debut at All Out helped AEW to its highest buy rate ever. Number 5, he brought back his most dangerous, compelling, exciting, and interesting character in the American Dragon. Number 4, he brought out a dangerous side of Kenny Omega, the animal in Kenny Omega that really we hadn't seen since he was in New Japan. Number 3, he continued to demonstrate unparalleled range and versatility between the ropes. There's dozens of wrestlers this year who you can make a list of 4-star plus matches or whatever, but what separates the good from the great in my eyes is how well they cope in smaller opportunities. How high or how low is their ceiling? Bryan Danielson is incapable of having a bad match. Doesn't matter if he's getting 3 minutes or 30 minutes, he's gonna give you something worthwhile, and that is to his absolute credit. Number 2, What do Minoru Suzuki, Eddie Kingston, Kenny Omega, Edge, and Roman Reigns, these world-class pro wrestlers, all have in common? In 2021, they all had their best match with Bryan Danielson. And at number 1, when Hangman Page needed a villain, Bryan Danielson gave him one. He didn't full-on turn heel, rather he expertly, deftly, as my colleague Michael Sidgwick might say, tapped into the more bastardly elements of his character to create a three-dimensional human being, this vicious sociopath who will go to almost any length to become world champion, to prove himself the best without actually going full on evil. It's very, very clever stuff. It doesn't slap you in your face with how obvious it is, and that takes a skilled performer, not just in the ring, but outside of it as well. And look, when you add up all these points, when you add up the highs of Bryan Danielson's year, the wonderful matches against Eddie Kingston, against Roman Reigns, the WrestleMania 37 main event, list them down. They're as good as anybody's, and in my eyes, better. For these reasons, Bryan Danielson is the 2021 Wrestler of the Year. Bye. Goodbye. Yes.